Considering the injuries the team has endured and the importance of the quarterback position, I will argue that this is the most significant and meaningful third preseason game that the Dolphins have played in a very long time. The third exhibition contest is always the most important. It's the dress rehearsal where we see more of the first team offense and defense than in any other game. The starters usually play into the second half and often a full 3 quarters. Of course, the main objective in all of these exhibitions is to maintain a clean bill of health, but you're getting the most thorough glimpse of what the team will look like come week 1 of the regular season. The description that I provided applies to every year. All football fans are aware of this. But considering the extenuating circumstances surrounding the Dolphins, this isn't just any year. I would argue this game has much more significance because expectations were magnified entering this season. Following a 10-6 campaign in 2016 in which you make the playoffs, the expectations were appropriately high. Most are hoping, if not expecting, the team to make another postseason appearance to build on the positive momentum from last year. You got to second season under Adam Gase and his coaching staff. They retained talented players like Kenny Stills, Andre Branch, Kiko Alonso, Rashad Jones. They signed free agents like Lawrence Timmons, drafted Charles Harris in the first round. The point is, generally, the arrow is pointing up for this team, and expectations were lofty. Now, that outlook may have changed considering the injuries the team has endured, most notably to Ryan Tannehill. When you lose your starting quarterback during the second week of training camp to a non-contact injury, one that seemed to be coming into his own as a player and a leader, right? I mean, that's a devastating occurrence when you lose your starting quarterback, especially in that fashion and at that time of the year. But the Jay Cutler signing was clearly Adam Gase's and the Dolphins front office's way to salvage this season, to bring in a guy that they think gives them the best chance to maintain the opportunity to build on what we saw a year ago. You don't bring in a retired 34-year-old who was days away from making his debut as a broadcaster and pay him $10 million just to come in and take some snaps and mundanely fulfill a duty. Matt Moore could have done that. Some other lower-level, cheaper, and less accomplished free agent from the street could have done that. The Dolphins, it's very clear, are pinning this season on Cutler. His knowledge of the system, his rapport with Gase, and in conjunction, Gase's uncanny ability to get the most out of his quarterback, regardless of who it is. So, if that's the framework and the context we're using entering the game on Thursday night, it lends credibility to the notion that this contest is arguably the most significant third exhibition game the Dolphins have played in recent memory. On top of that, the Dolphins need to work on getting the freshly signed Ray Maualuga into the linebacking core, bringing him in to fill the void left by Raekwon McMillan's injury. McMillan, by the way, showed so much promise in such a short period of time. It's a disappointing loss for the rookie. He's going to be out for the year. But they also need to monitor the battle for positioning on the depth chart in the secondary, especially in the absence of the lost Tony Lippett, who's out for the year as well. Will we look back at the Alteron Werner signing as one that proved to be vital in adding insurance for the cornerback position? Possibly, but that's something to watch for. Additionally, and maybe most importantly behind the quarterback spot, the Dolphins need to get a hold on, no pun intended, Sam Young, talking to you, what's happening on the offensive line. Because, albeit in a very small sample size, what we saw in the Ravens game was unacceptable and very troubling from that group up front. A unit that admittedly was missing 3 starters, but it reinforces the point that the O-line needs to stay healthy if any quarterback, let alone Jay Cutler, is going to be effective and have success for this team to win some games this year. And speaking of health, as I say this, the joint practices with the Eagles have yet to occur, so one can only hope that the injury bug that bit the Dolphins already during this preseason is content with the damage it's done and we'll move on to another team because it's already been a brutal run for the Dolphins organization. But getting back to the main point, the quarterback is the most important position in all of sports, let alone football. If the Dolphins, or any team for that matter, is going to have success in the NFL, they need a certain level of competence, effectiveness, and efficiency from that spot on the roster. So, Thursday's game in Philadelphia is not just our first extended glimpse of Jay Cutler in a Dolphins uniform. It's also our first reasonable glimpse into whether the Dolphins have a bright future in 2017. Or, if they're in for a long season. By no means is this an end-all, be-all game. I would never call a preseason game an end-all, be-all game. But it's our first real opportunity to evaluate whether this team, with Cutler at the helm, has a chance to legitimately build on 2016 and make this a decent season, or if this becomes a campaign in which we wind up lamenting the injuries that destroyed the season before it even began.